Thank you so much. Okay, you've started screen sharing. You've got something. Oh, hang on a minute. She's here. Hold on. Hang on, just a second. There you go. Good morning, Ray.
Hello. Good morning. Sorry.
You're right. It's all right. We were literally just about to start. There you are. So everybody is here. So good morning to you. So everybody else here is used to this. This is new for you, I think, Ray. So I'll just fill you in very, very quickly. So Connect session, we have a presentation today. It's from Lucy. We'll have a conversation about it afterwards, 15, 20 minutes, and then everybody will have 5 minutes apiece to remind everybody what they do, how they do it. Some know each other, some don't. We'll be 72 minutes and we'll be done by 11:45. Does that all fit? Do you understand? Does that all make sense? It's all very relaxed. All right, it's good to see you. In which case, we're now recording. So, Lucy, off you go.
Hey. Right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this whistle-stop tour on managing conflict. So thank you for coming along today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lucy. I'm the co-founder of Human Everything, and we are all about making the working world a better place. And we do this through our services of workplace mediation, mental health first aid training, DISC profiling and facilitation, and part and parcel of that is the wonderful world of conflict resolution. I know it makes a lot of people leap out of bed with a smile on their face in the mornings. But as you can imagine, conflict and the management of it is a really enormous topic. So this really is just a very quick toe in the water overview. So hopefully you'll have some things to take away after this morning's session that you could use in the workplace, but perhaps in your home life as well, maybe. So we're very quickly going to look at what conflict is. We're going to look at different conflict styles that yourself and other people will have during the conflict. And we're going to have a look at the different stages in the conflict life cycle as well. We're going to finish with some communication tips on how to communicate more effectively during a conflict. But because there's so much in this, I have put together an information booklet. So don't worry about writing anything down or trying to remember everything. And I'll share a link with you at the end, so you can download and access that information. So if everyone's okay and everyone's comfortable, hopefully I can distract you for 17.5 minutes out of this horrible heat that we're in at the moment. So off we go. So I wanted to quickly start by just asking you what your thoughts are when you think of conflict. If you want to unmute yourselves and just say what springs to mind when you think of the word conflict.
Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton on Sunday.
Anybody else?
Dispute, argument.
Yep.
Yes, argument and butting each other off at corners and Formula One. Yeah, definitely. That's a conflict for me.
Yep. Yeah, it's quite a loaded word, isn't it? And it's got a lot of negative imagery and connotations attached to it. And that crashing, that collision, that colliding, that butting of heads, whatever that looks like, I think that's possibly quite a common theme that comes up when we think about what conflict is.
It's also between nations, it can be as well, can't it? Not just between individuals.
Absolutely. Conflict can begin with two and can expand out to millions of people. Yeah, absolutely. And a good example would be a conflict between people that want to carry on wearing face masks and those who don't in a global pandemic. I mean, there's no end to conflict. So I have a definition here for you, which you might find surprising, you might not. And this one definition says that when an individual or group believe that another individual or group are preventing them from achieving their needs and goals or access to the resources that they need to achieve those needs and goals, or prevents them from expressing their values or beliefs in a way that they consider to be reasonable. And I think the key words noted in this definition I've highlighted, because what we're actually talking about, it mentions belief, it mentions goals and needs, it mentions what's considered reasonable. We're talking about people's perception, and often in a conflict we're looking at a misalignment of a point of view. So often, human nature being what it is, conflict can be tricky because what we're seeing often isn't the real cause of the actual issue in the conflict. And of course, it happens all the time and everywhere. It's a perfectly normal part of being a human being. And while it can be harmful and destructive, and these are the things that we sort of associate with conflict, it's also a really powerful driver of change, creativity, and growth. And when it occurs, particularly in the workplace, and when it's destructive, it also triggers a lot of psychological and emotional responses in people. And it's often those reactions and drivers that people are actually acting upon. So there are 5 conflict styles that can help us to understand how we relate to others during a conflict. And they're defined by how much of our own goals and needs matter to us versus how much the goals and needs of the other person matter to us. So I'm going to go through them one by one, see if you spot which one resonates more closely for you, and you might recognize the conflict style of other people that you know as well. So the first one we have is the turtle. And the turtle is going to withdraw into its shell to avoid conflict. They're going to give up all of their goals. They're going to give up all of their relationships. They basically just want to stay away from the issue. It's a real head in the sand mentality. They find it easier to do this, withdraw physically and psychologically rather than actually face any kind of conflict at all. Probably the complete opposite of that, we have the shark. So a shark will try to overpower their opponent by trying to force them to accept their solution. So the goals to the shark are really important and their relationships are of minor importance to them. So they don't really care who they piss off, they just want to win. Because for them, a conflict involves a winner and a loser, and they will do whatever they can to make sure that they are that winner. And they will do this by attacking, overpowering, overwhelming, or even trying to intimidate other people. Next, we have our teddy bears. So teddy bears place a huge amount of importance on the relationship that they have and little importance on their own needs and goals. So because they want to be accepted and liked by other people, they want to avoid the conflict in favor of making sure that everything's harmonious. And they worry that if a conflict continues, that the relationship will be ruined and people will get hurt. And to stop that, they will give up their own needs and goals to just try and preserve that relationship really and smooth everything over and just make sure that everybody's happy at the expense of themselves. We have a fox. They're moderately concerned with their goals and they're also moderately concerned with their relationships, but they're actually looking for compromise. So we've got a bit more movement going on with this animal type. So they're happy to give it part of what they want and they will try and persuade the other person to give it part of what they want as well, to come up with a solution where there's some kind of agreeable middle ground in between the two. And then finally, we have the owl, and the owl is a collaborator. So they highly value their goals and they highly value their relationships. But the difference here is that they view conflict as a problem that's there to be solved. And by seeking this, the solving of a combined problem with the other person, they're engaging in discussion, they're looking for collaboration. And what they're actually doing is looking to strengthen that relationship by coming up with something that is mutually beneficial to both. So no one's giving up anything, everyone's walking away stronger and happier for it. So have a little think about which animal you think you most closely resonate with. If you find yourself in a conflict situation, how big or small the conflict, it doesn't matter. We'll find that we often fall into one of these categories, there or thereabouts. And I think it's quite clear that obviously the owl is the most desirable way to manage conflict, but not everybody is there. So just something to take away and think about. If you're one of the other 4, what sort of steps do you think you could take to make yourself and channel your inner owl? Because he's in there somewhere, I'm sure. So managing the different stages of the conflict life cycle, conflicts do have a definite life cycle, and more often than not, they do tend to track the same course. And at each stage, there is an opportunity for resolution, but there's also a risk for further escalation. And the more that you can do to manage conflicts, the earlier the stage that it's in, obviously the less of a negative impact it's going to have. So at stage 1, this is all about the underlying roots of the issue. And this could be any number of reasons that are going on. But periods of change are really likely candidates for this. And an example that springs to mind for me is at the start of the pandemic, a manufacturing organisation, there was a production line that was key workers, so they had to keep coming in and producing, but there were also office staff who were told to go and work from home. So the change has happened, it's taken everybody by surprise. They've just started this new way of working. Here we are, pre-conflict, stage 1. And to manage conflict at this stage, really the underlying message is to expect it. And when I say to expect conflict, it's going to happen. And where you've got people, you're going to have opposing views, different points of views, different perspectives. So it's all around having an open and collaborative culture where people feel that they can have an open dialogue, they can raise issues that they're not comfortable with, and they can have these conversations before it gets any further. If you're an organisation that has an HR function, it could be that you have some kind of resolution policy that precedes any kind of disciplinary or grievance, because those are often the only tools that HR have at their disposal to manage conflicts. But it's all around having something in place where you know it's going to happen, so how are we going to deal with it when it does? The next stage is stage 2, early conflict. And this is where positions will start to harden and communication becomes a bit limited, maybe it's disrupted. This is where you'll find alliances and cliques of people starting to form, and people are starting to blame each other for the problem. And they'll start to lose sight of any common ground that they might have once had, and they will focus on the factors that have driven them apart. So going back to my previous example, the manufacturing company would have forgotten that actually we're one organisation, we're lucky to still be working, we need to keep working and keep our jobs. And actually what they're focusing on now is the fact that we're in the building and you're working from home. And that's not fair. You're not coming into the office. We've been working the whole time. You don't know what it's like. And this is the sort of language you may start to hear. You always, you never, you must. And this is the language of conflict. And if you hear it, it's really important that you start to do something about it. And ideally, this is the stage where a manager would step in and actually nip this in the bud. Otherwise, you miss the opportunity and things will fester. So if you were managing at this stage, what would you do? Well, basically, you're there to help people let off some steam. So give them an opportunity to step back, talk to each other, talk through exactly what's going on for them, have an adult-to-adult dialogue, be open and honest. And at this point, the positions aren't so entrenched, the attitudes can actually start to be realigned, and you can get back to that single focus on what that common ground should look like. However, this often doesn't happen, and we can move into stage 3 where we're at mid-conflict. And this is where we start to see people maybe being a bit naughty, maybe playing a few destructive tactics, and it's all about winning. And you might see perhaps somebody launches a grievance against somebody else. There might be allegations flying around. You may even start to see people being more absent from the workplace. It starts to get quite stressful. And the language that you hear will change, and it will change to a language of blame. You know, if it wasn't for them, you know, this would never have happened. You're the manager, you need to do something about them. And the purpose of the use of this type of language is to present the other group of people or the person as the wrongdoer. And it's to influence somebody else. And it's usually they're trying to influence a decision maker, perhaps a manager or a manager's manager, and they want them to take sides. So going back to our manufacturing example in the pandemic, Dave wasn't here when our important customer came, he's always working from home, supposedly. If it wasn't for us being here, we would have lost that. You need to sort him out. He's not doing his job. That's what they're trying to do. They're establishing their position. They're correct. Poor old Dave is working from home. He's in the wrong. But you as his manager, you need to sort this out. So at this stage, it gets a bit harder to manage. If you step in at this point, backing down isn't going to be an option for any of the people in conflict here. They're feeling out of control. They're making demands that want immediate action. And because of that, nothing that you do is going to be workable or manageable. So again, it's about dialogue. but it needs to be framed in a way that everybody can get on board with that in a positive light, and it's not seen as a way of them backing down or stepping away or losing face. And that, I'm not going to lie, is actually quite a difficult thing to do. Then you have stage 4. This is late conflict. This is where it all goes kaboom, or it implodes and just eats away viciously. And even well-performing teams at this point can start to fail. The wheels can fall off. This is survival at all costs, and this is where you see attacks that can harm reputations, integrity. It will create power bases and alliances, and like a black hole, it just sucks in lots of other people from the periphery that might not even be involved in the initial conflicts. Pressure increases, stress goes through the roof, and it's basically mutually assured destruction on both sides. And an outcome will be, it could be a disciplinary, it could be grievances, people might lose their jobs through a dismissal, there could be criminal investigations, litigation, people are off sick for months on end. It really does seem like a grim picture, but trust me, it can really spiral very quickly out of control, and these things do happen. Management at this stage is get a mediator. Of course, I'd say that, but it's basically a time in the conflict where you need somebody with fresh eyes to come in. A calm, rational response is going to actually sit down and work to resolve how this is going to work moving forward. Because when you're looking at conflicts in the workplace, you might not be best friends with the people that you work with, but ultimately we need working relationships that keep the business moving forward. And then the final stage that people often forget about is what happens afterwards, you know, the aftermath. Business goes on, stuff still has to be going out the door. And it's often HR or managers that are left to try and pick up the pieces, but what do you do with that? And, you know, in the meantime, people might be feeling hurt, things would have been said, people might be vulnerable, people might be feeling guilty, but you can guarantee there will be stories and there will be gossip. So managing the aftermath, it's a bit like having a sit down and a reflection, and what do we learn from this? It's about talking and listening, agreeing the way forward, and most importantly, it's about forgiveness. And I think forgiveness is usually a phrase that you probably wouldn't associate so much with the workplace. But actually, for people to move on from what's gone on, there really needs to be this shared learning of the experience. And believe it or not, if you can handle this stage well, it can be a really fantastic team building opportunity. So when it comes to improving your communication during a conflict, it's communication with compassion. And what I'm describing here in a very small nutshell, because this is a huge topic, it's about a guide that helps us to reframe how we express ourselves, how we hear other people, and how we can resolve conflict by focusing on what we actually are observing and what we're feeling, but really what we need as well and what we're requesting of other people. So it's a way of communicating really authentically, which allows people to stay true to themselves. It helps to transform old patterns of language that might come across as slightly aggressive or defensive into a place where there's more compassion and empathy. And some top tips for this. So really, the key one is to stay calm and open to discussion. So if you're managing and there's a conflict of workers in front of you, or perhaps it's your kids at home, staying calm, staying open, you're there to listen, understand, try and identify what the source of the conflict or the disagreement actually is, because as we've seen, people are reacting emotionally, and it might not actually be what they're saying and doing that is the real cause of the problem. And you can use language, so talking about the situation using words such as us, include yourself in it rather than you're doing this. And when you're looking at a solution, it's a solution that we're doing this together. It's not you doing it, we're on this solution, this is how we're going to fix this. You can identify and express your feelings by paying attention to terms that don't explicitly define what you're feeling. And I think we do this really easily without knowing it. So we'll often say things like, you know, I feel like you abandoned me. But if you're the person that's been told to, what do you do with that? When somebody says to you, I feel you abandoned me, you've got nowhere to take that. So instead of saying that, you could say, I feel abandoned and that makes me upset. Straight away, the other person knows what being upset feels like. They can understand that you feel upset because they feel like you weren't there for them. And that can open a discussion and understanding and empathy. Justify and explain your needs so that people can understand what you actually want. So instead of saying, well, you know, I need you to get here on time, again, that's just a command, that's just a statement. But saying, I want you to arrive on time because I interpret your delay as a lack of respect, you can take more internalization with that. And there's more understanding of why you're wanting somebody there on time. If you're negotiating actions, make sure they are for everybody involved rather than just one side over another. And be clear about what your requests are. So again, it's trying to get rid of this commands language. So instead of saying something like, well, starting tomorrow, I want you to arrange those files, you could say, could you take charge of organising these files from tomorrow? And that person can then say, well, yes, I can. Or, oh, actually, I wasn't planning on being here tomorrow. Perhaps I can do it on Thursday. So that's just a few tips on what we're talking about with compassionate communication. So we've taken a really speedy journey through what conflict is. I hope you found your spirit animal guide to conflict and how you can use those to take effective steps. If you know what somebody else's animal is, you can understand where they're coming from in the conflict, and that will help you use your words and actions to get a mutually agreeable solution. But by effectively communicating and using open and compassionate communication techniques, conflict isn't really something that should be avoided, but actually embraced for the huge growth and learning opportunity that it is. So if we can understand it and we can manage it, and we can resolve it and communicate through it, then we hopefully won't have it ending in tears. Maybe happy ones, but we can cope with that. So that's the end of my whistle stop tour. Hope you found it interesting. Thank you for coming along and listening to that today. And I've got a link on the slide, but I'll copy and paste it into the chat as well so that you can access the information that goes along with this. The password to access the page is just family business. I'll share that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lucy. If you could unshare, please. I'll stop the